Let's talk about Holly Holm versus Megan Anderson at UFC 225. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fight Scene. On this YouTube channel, we unpack things that are happening in the world of MMA and combat sports. And today I want to talk just a little bit about Holly Holm versus Megan Anderson, which is happening at UFC 225. This is part of my continued video series on UFC 225. If you haven't checked out the other videos, take a look at my channel. You can see them, and I'll link them in the description below. That includes the full card breakdown for UFC 225, as well as a couple of the other fights like Alistair Overeem versus Curtis Blades, CM Punk versus Mike Jackson. I've also done one on Whitaker versus Romero, and the next video will be on Colby Covington versus RDA. I'm looking forward to that video. But today I want to talk about Holly Holm versus Megan Anderson. And I wasn't originally going to make this video because it's not a fight that everybody is super talking about. And so I wasn't sure that I wanted to spend the time making the video. Not that they take me that long. You know, I basically turn on the camera and start talking. But I just started vacation, a 1-week vacation. It's Saturday here, and I figure why not? So I want to just give you my initial thoughts on the fight. I don't have a lot of notes. Actually, I have 0 notes really planned for this one. And again, the reason for that is that I don't know enough about Megan Anderson. I have to be upfront about that. I'm a big fan of MMA. But there's so much of it these days, right? There's a lot of MMA out there on the internet. I have Fight Pass, and so there's a 24-hour live stream of fighting happening all the time. It's not always live, but I mean, there's so much fighting to watch. And one of the things that I don't watch a ton of is Invicta. I've watched a little bit of Invicta, but for those of you who don't know and are watching, Invicta is an all-women's MMA promotion. And Megan Anderson, it was their interim champion, and she was eventually made their undisputed featherweight champion. Featherweight? Yeah, that's right. Featherweight, 145 champion. And I don't watch a ton of Invicta. It's not something I watch a lot of. And so I don't know a ton about Megan Anderson. I watch her breakdown videos. Those are pretty neat. And I've seen at least 2 different highlight videos on Megan Anderson. And then I've obviously seen a lot of Holly Holm. I'm a big Holly Holm fan, just to be upfront and put the bias out there. I've really enjoyed Holly Holm's career. I was one of the few. I wasn't making videos back then, but I had if you can check my Twitter, if you go back way back when, I sort of like tweeted Dana White, just saying, "Hey, bring Holly Holm to the UFC." And that was before she was in the UFC, obviously. And I knew that given her boxing and kickboxing background, that she would be a real test for Ronda Rousey. And not to gloat, but I had that feeling that she would win. I knew that she would win, and I didn't put any money on it. I definitely should have. But I am a big Holly Holm fan, so let's get that bias up front. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to make the video is that I recently was at Buffalo Wild Wing watching some UFC fights with some friends, and we kind of got into this heated debate about how good really is Holly Holm. I was on the pro Holly side of things, and they were very much on the anti Holly side of things. And even if you just go on the internet and take a look at the discussion around Holly Holm and her contribution to women's MMA and her impact at 135, you see a lot of people sort of referring to her as the Buster Douglas of MMA. And if you're unfamiliar with who Buster Douglas is, he was the first person to ever beat Mike Tyson. And at that time, I think he was a crazy underdog. I don't know what the numbers were. Nobody was giving Buster Douglas a chance, and he knocked him out. And he kind of went down in history as this guy that beat Mike Tyson and then didn't really do much else with his career. And so it was his big 15 minutes of fame, and then kind of faded into obscurity for the most part, except for this big win, right? And a lot of people have been calling Holly Holm this Buster Douglas of MMA because she has that defining moment against Ronda Rousey and then loses to Shevchenko. She kind of, boring fight against Betch Correa. I'm mispronouncing her last name. And what else? Her fight against Cyborg. I mean, she's not done as well as maybe some people expected after having beaten Ronda Rousey. She had that fight against Jermaine Durandamy, and just people have not been as impressed with Holly as I have been impressed with Holly. And so this started this debate during the fight, some other fights we were watching, about how good is Holly Holm really? And I believe that she is one of the best pound for pound women's fighters today, despite some performances that have been fairly lackluster. And one of the reasons why I believe that is because if we look at the fight against Cyborg, now yes, she lost that fight, but it is by far the most competitive fight we've seen against Cyborg. Holly performed pretty well in that fight, and it was actually going into the 5th round a lot closer than you maybe think it was. And so a lot of people were saying that going into that 5th round, like, you could maybe be scoring that fight for Holly depending on how you see it. And I personally didn't see it that way, but I know after the fact, people were sort of saying, like, you know, Holly had a really good chance of winning by decision there. And I think that even though she lost that fight, she displayed the kind of high-level MMA ability and competency that I've expected out of her, even in a loss, because Cyborg is the greatest of all time as far as women's fighting goes. And so when we look at this matchup between Holly Holm and Megan Anderson, I don't know, to be honest, enough about Megan Anderson because I haven't watched all of her fights to really make a fair judgment, but I'm going to just go based on my gut and my bias, which is that as a Holly Holm fan. In the highlights that I have seen from Megan Anderson, I have to say that I don't want to say I was unimpressed, but the competition level, I hate to say this, I hate to disparage any fighter, but the competition level that Megan Anderson has been fighting, at least in the highlight videos that I've seen, is not up to UFC caliber, let's just say. Some pretty sloppy, just not the greatest opponents of all time. Now, that's not to say that Holly hasn't fought some people that, or like, you know, you look at some of her fights and say, well, how good of competition is that really? I can understand that criticism, but comparatively, Holly Holm has been facing higher level competition for much longer than Megan Anderson. And this is really Megan's first really strong test and to see how good is she going to fare in the UFC, and is she a top 10 fighter? Well, and she's definitely top 10, I guess, in the world of MMA. Again, being Invicta champion at 145 is a pretty big deal because they actually have a 145 division as opposed to the UFC where Holly and Cyborg really are the 145 division. Which brings me to the most important factor of this fight, is that Megan Anderson is well, at least from what I can tell, much bigger than Holly Holm. She's a true 145er. She looks to be very muscular and very strong and looks to be a true strong big 145er, whereas Holly can fight at 145, but we've seen her be successful at 135, and she does look bigger and good at 145, but it's hard to call her a true 145er. Whereas Megan Anderson, that is her natural weight class. And so that really could play a factor in this fight. You know, where I think it probably won't play a factor is that when you look at Holly Holm's style, it's that she is a point kickboxer. Does that make sense? You know, she's most likely to go to decision because she is in and out points you in the striking exchanges using her kickboxing. She likes to maintain distance and not necessarily grapple and clinch too much. She did do that in the Cyborg fight, and when you actually look at how she did that in the Cyborg fight, she was able to muscle Cyborg up against the cage a little bit, getting those double underhooks and push her against the cage. And Cyborg is the bigger fighter, which is why I believe that size won't make the difference that I'm sure most people are thinking it's going to. So when I made the original UFC 225 prediction video, I saw a couple of your comments saying, you know, you're underestimating Megan Anderson, and you're underestimating because she's much bigger than Holly. And that's a valid thing, but look at the Cyborg fight. Cyborg is much bigger than Holly, and she was able to really hold her own in those stand-up clinches and push Cyborg against the cage using those double underhooks. So to me, I'm not super worried about that. You know, Megan Anderson, I will say, though, when you just look at her record, she does have a lot of TKOs, so she displays that stopping power that, for the most part, we haven't seen out of Holly Holm, right? She stopped Ronda with a head kick. So it's, I mean, a very powerful head kick. But outside of that, in the Bethe Correia fight, she also had a stoppage there. But, you know, she's not really the kind of fighter that you expect to get a lot of stoppages. And so it's hard to say if Holly, it's hard to predict a fight here where you believe that Holly's going to win by stoppage or submission or something like that. I just don't think it's going to happen. And so if I was predicting the fight both ways, I would believe that it's either a TKO win for Megan Anderson or a decision for Holly. If I have my feet to the fire on this one, or if I was putting money on it, I would bet with my gut here, which is Holly Holm by decision. And I, you know, obviously I reserve the right to be wrong on any prediction that I make. It's MMA. It's so volatile in regards to predictions. There's a lot of people, a lot of high-level analysts that just straight up won't make predictions because it's so volatile. But for me, I definitely feel comfortable making the Holly Holm prediction, but also would understand if a few weeks from now I was terribly wrong. But I believe that Holly Holm will win this fight by decision. I believe that she will also demonstrate and showcase that she is the top tier of women's MMA. So for Alex and Ricker, if you're watching, or any of my other friends who I was debating about how good Holly Holm is, I think that this fight will show that she is really the top tier of women's MMA. And if you don't believe me after she beats the Invicta 145 champion, I'm not sure what to tell you. Anyway, that's my video on this. Hopefully it was fairly quick and not too long. I really appreciate all of you watching and sticking with me as I ramble on about my opinions on MMA and make these videos, which are way longer than I ever intended them to be. For those of you who comment on these videos, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you just engaging with me on this content. And thank you for everybody with the kind words about the videos I've been making. So I really appreciate it. Thank you again. I'm going to make one more video in this series on 225, which is RDA versus Colby Covington. I'm just getting up the nerve to make it, and hopefully that'll be up this week because I am on vacation, so that'll be good. Thanks again. Fight the good fight, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to watch this content. I'm just a fan with an opinion and a camera, but I love the sport of MMA. So if you want to see some more videos, you can take a look here on the right of this screen. And other than that, I will catch you in the next video.